The mailbox rattled, spilling letters across the little foyer of the Henderson home, but one caught her eye immediately, not because of its size or color, but because it seemed impossibly real. 11-year-old Clara Henderson clutched it tightly in her small hands, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had addressed it to Santa at the corner office, not really expecting anyone to reply, yet something deep inside told her today might be different. Across town, Khalid al-Rummi, the Arab billionaire CEO known for his empire-spanning finance, real estate, and philanthropy, was reviewing paperwork in his high-rise office. The city glittered below him, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on the stack of letters from children, each one asking for dreams, hope, or, in Clara's case, comfort for a little girl who had lost her mother and whose father had left her world suddenly silent. When his assistant handed him Clara's letter, he paused. The handwriting was shaky, yet earnest. "Dear Santa at the corner office, I know you're busy, but my daddy isn't here anymore. I just wanted to tell you I miss him and hope you can bring a little magic to our house this Christmas." Khalid's eyes lingered on the words. Something about the simplicity, the raw honesty, the small hand reaching out for hope pierced through the layers of boardroom meetings and financial reports. He could have delegated the response, sent a gift anonymously, or even ignored it. But he didn't. By mid-morning, Clara and her little brother, Oliver, were playing in their modest living room when a soft knock echoed through the front door. Clara froze, a sudden thrill of disbelief rushing through her chest. Who could that be?" she whispered, clutching Oliver's hand. The knock came again, deliberate, confident. When Clara peeked through the frosted glass, her eyes widened. Standing there was a man she would never forget, tall, impeccably dressed, eyes sharp yet gentle, Khalid al-Rummi himself, the Arab billionaire she had never met, holding a small gift and a warm smile. "Hello, Clara. I believe this letter was for me," he said, his voice calm, commanding, yet full of kindness. "And I thought I'd deliver it in person." Clara's jaw dropped. You're Santa," she whispered, hope and disbelief colliding. Khalid smiled faintly. "Not exactly Santa. But I do believe in keeping promises, especially ones made to brave little girls who write letters from the heart." The room seemed to hold its breath. Oliver peeked around his sister, eyes wide. Their modest home suddenly felt like the center of a world that, for one brief moment, stretched all the way to the skyscrapers where billionaires made decisions that touched lives. Clara took a tentative step forward. "You came here for me?" "Yes," Khalid replied, placing a small, elegantly wrapped box on the coffee table. "And for Oliver, too. But mostly to remind you, hope exists, even when the world feels silent." The afternoon sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating the room in soft warmth, and for the first time since losing their father, Clara felt a flicker of magic, of possibility, of being truly seen. The knock, the gift, and the man behind it were not just gestures. They were the beginning of a story that would intertwine courage, empathy, and the power of a single act of kindness from someone who had the means to change lives. Clara and Oliver stared at Khalid, unable to fully comprehend the moment. The small living room, cluttered with holiday decorations and scattered toys, seemed to shrink and expand at the same time, charged with anticipation. Khalid, with a quiet confidence that filled the space, knelt slightly to meet their eye level. "I read your letter," he began gently, "and I wanted to come because some promises are too important to leave to chance. Especially promises of hope." Clara's small fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sweater. "But, you're a CEO. A billionaire. You don't usually come to houses like ours, right?" Her voice was both curious and hesitant, the innocent wonder of a child mingling with the guarded caution of someone who had felt lost too deeply. Khalid's gaze softened. "Most people don't. But influence, wealth, they only have meaning when used to touch lives that need it most. You and Oliver deserve to be seen, not ignored." Oliver, younger and more impulsive, edged closer to the gift. "Is this really for me?" His voice trembled with excitement. Khalid handed him a small, carefully wrapped box. Oliver tore it open to reveal a handcrafted model airplane, every detail precise, a tiny symbol of imagination and freedom. Clara picked up her gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her name embossed in gold. Her eyes filled with tears. It's perfect," she whispered. "How did you know?" Khalid smiled faintly, almost to himself. "I read your letter carefully. You spoke about missing your father, about feeling unheard. I wanted to give you something to hold on to, something to help you express what's inside." The siblings' eyes met, and for the first time in months, the tension that had shadowed their small home seemed to lift. Khalid remained standing a few steps away, his presence calm, authoritative, yet gentle, like a lighthouse illuminating the storm of grief they had carried silently. Clara hesitated, then asked, "But, why? Why would you come all the way here? You could have just sent something." Khalid's eyes lingered on the two children, and his voice deepened, steady and sincere. "Because some things are more than gifts. They are messages. They say, you matter. You are not invisible. And someone believes in you. No one should have to wait for a miracle to feel that." The sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the small living room. Clara's mother had passed when she was very young, and since their father's untimely death, the house had felt quieter, lonelier. Yet Khalid's arrival shifted everything. It was a tangible demonstration that hope could arrive in unexpected forms, and that one person, even a CEO whose life seemed a world apart, could make the invisible children of the world feel truly seen. Oliver looked up, wide-eyed. Can he stay for lunch?" Clara laughed softly, a sound Khalid noticed immediately. He shook his head with a small smile. "I'll have to leave soon. But I can promise you this. Today is just the beginning. You've reminded me that wealth without compassion is meaningless. And sometimes, listening, showing up, is the greatest gift anyone can give." Clara nodded slowly, clutching her journal tightly. I understand. You really are like Santa, but real." Khalid's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "Perhaps. But remember, the real magic doesn't come from me. It comes from the courage in your heart, the love you hold for each other, and the hope that survives even in the hardest times." The siblings exchanged glances, their eyes brimming with emotion. In that small living room, the world beyond the walls seemed distant and unimportant. Here, hope had arrived in person, carried by a man whose life of power had intersected with theirs in a moment that would reshape their understanding of generosity, justice, and humanity. Khalid finally stood, checking his watch. "I must go soon. But before I do, know this, I will always remember your courage. And when the world seems silent, know that someone somewhere will act because they see you." Clara hugged her journal tightly. "I'll remember. I promise." Khalid nodded, a quiet smile on his lips. He stepped toward the door, leaving behind more than gifts. He left behind a lesson in hope, empathy, and the transformative power of one person choosing to act. The sun continued to illuminate the room, golden light bathing the siblings in warmth and possibility. And for the first time in a long while, Clara and Oliver felt the world could hold magic. Not the fantasy of Santa Claus, but the real, human magic of kindness, courage, and moral action. The following morning, Clara and Oliver awoke with a sense of anticipation neither had felt in months. The gifts from Khalid lay neatly on the living room table, a journal and a model airplane. But more than the objects, it was the feeling of being truly seen that lingered, like a warm ember refusing to fade. Across town, Khalid al-Rumi reviewed his schedule in his sleek office, but his mind was not on meetings or profit margins. It was on the letter from a small girl who had reached across the void of loss to connect with someone she had never met. The act of showing up, of walking through her door unannounced, had shifted something in him, a reminder that influence was meaningless unless it touched lives in profound ways. Later that morning, his driver pulled up quietly to the Henderson home. Clara opened the door to see Khalid standing there again, holding a carefully packed box of groceries and holiday essentials. "I thought these might help," he said simply, setting the items on the kitchen counter. "A little support for the season, so you don't have to worry about what's on the table today." Clara's eyes widened. Sir. This is too much. You shouldn't have. Khalid smiled faintly. I did because I could. But more importantly, because no child should feel the weight of loss alone. Strength without action is meaningless. Influence without compassion is hollow. Today, you are not alone. Oliver tugged at her sleeve. Can we say thank you? Clara nodded, swallowing her pride. Yes, thank you, sir, she said, her voice steady but filled with awe. Khalid's presence carried an authority that made the children feel simultaneously safe and inspired, a rare combination they had never encountered before. As Khalid moved through the modest home, he spoke softly to the children about resilience, courage, and the importance of hope. Sometimes, he said, life asks you to be brave even when you feel small. And sometimes, others step in not to take away your struggles, but to remind you of the power you already have. Clara's eyes glistened. Do you really think we can get through it? Even without Mom and Dad? Khalid crouched slightly to meet her gaze, his expression both firm and gentle. Yes. Because hope, courage, and love are stronger than loss. And because people will act for what is right, even strangers who choose to walk through your door. He lingered a moment, watching as the children absorbed his words. For Khalid, this was more than a charitable gesture. It was a lesson in moral leadership, demonstrating that wealth and influence must be exercised to protect and uplift, not simply to impress or accumulate power. Before leaving, he handed Clara a small envelope. Inside are letters from a few friends and colleagues, he said. People who also believe in helping, in standing up for others, in choosing kindness over indifference. Read them when you feel uncertain. They are reminders that courage is contagious. As Khalid stepped back onto the sidewalk, Clara and Oliver waved, hearts pounding with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They had experienced firsthand the power of deliberate moral action, a living example that one person's courage could reshape an entire world, even if only in a small corner of it. And in the quiet hum of their home, the siblings felt something extraordinary, a renewed belief in human goodness, in justice, and in the unseen strength that rises when someone with influence chooses to act rightly. Days passed, and the Henderson home began to feel different, not because the house had changed, but because the atmosphere carried hope and support. Clara and Oliver approached their daily routines with a new sense of confidence, carrying the invisible weight of Khalid's presence, even when he was not there. Khalid returned once more, not as a distant benefactor, but as a quiet guide. He brought books, art supplies, and lessons of practical life skills, each carefully chosen not merely as gifts, but as tools to empower and cultivate resilience. Knowledge, he said softly, is a gift no one can take from you. Your imagination and your courage, those are yours forever. Protect them. Clara watched him unpack the materials with care. Sir, why are you helping us so much? She asked, her voice curious, tinged with the innocence of someone still learning the complexities of human generosity. Khalid paused, looking at the siblings with a mixture of gravity and warmth. Because influence is meaningless without responsibility. Because wealth is hollow if it does not create opportunities for others. And because every child deserves to know they are seen, valued, and supported, even when life feels unfair. Oliver's eyes sparkled as he examined the model kits and storybooks. Do you always help people like this? He asked, wide-eyed. Khalid smiled faintly. Not always. But when someone reaches out, even in the smallest way, a letter, a call, a plea, you act. That's how change starts. Not with grand gestures, but with deliberate choices that uphold justice, dignity, and hope. The siblings felt it deeply, this intersection of power and compassion. For them, Khalid was no longer just a billionaire CEO. He was a moral compass, a living reminder that influence could shape lives profoundly when wielded rightly. Over the next week, Khalid coordinated with trusted colleagues to ensure the children's stability. School support, extra tutoring, holiday provisions, creating a framework for the family to regain security and confidence. Each action was subtle yet decisive, reinforcing a larger principle. True power is exercised to protect and uplift, not to dominate or impress. In the neighborhood, whispers began to spread. Children spoke of the billionaire who came to their doors, of a man who listened, cared, and acted. Parents began to notice that generosity coupled with accountability could ripple outward, inspiring others to step forward in unexpected ways. One afternoon, as Khalid prepared to leave again, Clara ran to the door holding her journal. "Sir, I wrote something for you. About hope. About courage. About not giving up." Khalid accepted the journal gently, opening it to see pages filled with bright, honest words. He nodded, touched in a way few had ever seen him publicly display. "Keep writing. Let your words inspire others as courage inspires you. One act of honesty, one act of hope, can ripple far beyond what we can see." Clara beamed. Oliver looked on in awe. Khalid's presence, once fleeting, had now created a lasting impression of moral clarity, hope, and empowerment, a lesson that would echo in their hearts long after the gifts were opened and the holidays passed. And as he drove away, the siblings watched him disappear into the city, feeling for the first time that even in a world that can be harsh and unpredictable, there are people who act decisively to restore hope and justice, creating a ripple that could change everything. A week later, Khalid returned to the Henderson home, his presence now less like a visitor and more like a force of guidance and protection. The small house was filled with the warm smell of baking bread. Clara had taken to using the recipe he had suggested, a way to fill the quiet with purpose. Oliver was sprawled across the floor with a stack of new books, absorbed in stories of courage and adventure, his imagination finally free to roam. Khalid's sharp eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle changes in the children's demeanor. Clara moved with a quiet confidence, her small gestures precise and assured. She was no longer the hesitant, fearful girl who had written the letter. And Oliver's laughter rang freely, unburdened by grief. "You've grown," Khalid said softly, his tone carrying both authority and warmth. "Not just in age, but in courage, in resilience, in understanding that hope is not something given, it's something you nurture." Clara stepped forward, holding her journal tightly. "Sir, we've been practicing what you said, about courage, about hope, about acting even when things are hard." Khalid nodded approvingly. "Good. But now it's time to ensure that hope isn't fragile. Life can be unpredictable. Strength without support can falter. That is why I am here today, not just to teach, but to secure your future." He revealed a stack of documents on the table, neatly organized. Clara and Oliver's eyes widened. "What is this?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "These are plans," Khalid explained. "For your education, for your stability, for opportunities you would never have access to otherwise. Scholarships, mentoring programs, and a fund to ensure that no unexpected hardship leaves you vulnerable again." Oliver whispered, "For real? All of this, for us?" Khalid crouched slightly, meeting their eyes directly. "Yes. But remember, this is not about dependency. This is about creating a foundation from which you can act boldly, bravely, and responsibly. True power is in giving people the tools to rise, not merely handing them gifts." Clara's hands shook as she glanced at the documents, realizing the depth of Khalid's commitment. I don't know how to thank you. You've changed everything." Khalid's voice softened, carrying the quiet weight of moral clarity. "No thanks are necessary. When you act for justice, for hope, for dignity, the reward is in the impact you create. What you do with these opportunities, that will honor the effort, and honor the principle that no child should feel unseen or unheard." The afternoon sun poured through the windows, casting the small room in a golden light. Clara and Oliver felt something they had not felt in months: security, empowerment, and the knowledge that someone with the power to act had chosen to protect them. Khalid stood to leave, his presence commanding yet reassuring. "Remember, courage is contagious. Hope is deliberate. And influence is meaningful only when wielded for good. Carry these lessons forward, and let your own actions ripple outward." As he closed the door behind him, The siblings clutched each other, hearts pounding with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The gifts, the mentoring, and now the secured future were more than gestures. They were a blueprint for resilience, morality, and hope in a world that often seemed indifferent. The ripple of Khalid's actions had not only restored their confidence but had established a moral foundation that would guide them for the rest of their lives, proving that deliberate, compassionate power could change destinies. By the following afternoon, the Henderson home had transformed in ways subtle yet profound. The laughter of Oliver, the calm determination in Clara, and the warmth in the house no longer felt fragile. They radiated stability, hope, and courage, cultivated through Khalid's deliberate, moral intervention. Khalid returned one last time, not with gifts, but with a presence that carried the weight of accountability, empathy, and authority. He moved slowly through the small living room, his gaze taking in every detail: the worn carpet, the small Christmas tree Clara had decorated, the model airplane now hanging proudly from the ceiling. It was all modest, yet it held immense meaning. This was a home now fortified with hope, resilience, and dignity. "You've grown," Khalid said, his voice steady and warm. "Not just in knowledge, but in courage, in understanding the value of hope, and in seeing that action matters more than words." Clara stepped forward, holding her journal. "Sir, I wrote another letter. This one is about everything you've done, and everything we've learned." She handed it to him, her hands shaking slightly. Khalid opened it and read silently, the words capturing the depth of the impact he had created. Tears shimmered in Clara's eyes as she watched him absorb her words. "You see," Khalid said softly, "true influence is not measured by wealth, by status, or by power alone. It is measured by the lives you touch, the courage you instill, and the hope you ignite. What you do with the opportunities in front of you, that is your real power." Oliver ran to him, hugging his leg. You saved us," he exclaimed. Khalid knelt, looking into the boy's eyes. "Not saved. Guided. Protected. And you will carry that forward. Every choice, every act of courage, every time you stand for what's right, that is the true legacy of hope." The sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating every corner of the room. It felt as if the world itself had paused, holding its breath, honoring the unfolding of justice, compassion, and moral courage. Khalid's presence was not merely a visit, it was a lesson, a living testament to how influence must be wielded ethically. He finally stood, placing a hand on the doorframe. "Remember, children, life will challenge you. There will be moments when the world feels silent, unfair, or unkind. But you now know this: truth, hope, and courage are powerful allies. And there are people who will act when others do not, but you too must act with integrity, strength, and empathy." Clara and Oliver watched him walk away, their hearts pounding, their minds alight with newfound understanding. It was more than generosity. It was a transformative moment of moral leadership, one that would guide them for years, shaping the way they viewed justice, power, and human connection. And as Khalid disappeared into the bustling streets of the city, the siblings held hands, hearts aligned with a profound truth: that courage, empathy, and deliberate action could ripple far beyond one letter, one visit, or one act of kindness. It could redefine the future entirely. True power is not measured by wealth, influence, or prestige. It is measured by the courage to act when injustice, vulnerability, or need appears. Khalid's intervention proves that influence gains its highest value when it uplifts, protects, and restores dignity. Hope is not passive. Courage is not optional. Action rooted in empathy and moral clarity creates ripples that touch countless lives, far beyond what the eye can see. Clara and Oliver's journey illustrates that even in loss, in silence, and in uncertainty, humanity can shine brightest when power is wielded with conscience and care. The lesson is universal. Choose to act, protect the vulnerable, and let every decision reflect integrity, compassion, and moral responsibility. In doing so, we transform not only individual lives but the world itself, one courageous act at a time.